Over the past week, we've been going through Harbor Freight tool reviews, digging through mechanic forums, and reading hundreds of homeowner complaints to see which tools keep showing up in failure stories. When you put enough of those experiences side by side, clear patterns begin to appear. Certain Harbor Freight brands come up again and again in discussions about motors burning out early, parts breaking under normal use, or tools that simply don't last as long as buyers expected. In this video, we're breaking down the Harbor Freight Blacklist, 7 tool brands many buyers say you should avoid. And we're starting right away with one of the most popular brands. Blacklist number 7, Warrior. Warrior is one of the first brands many people encounter when they walk into Harbor Freight. The tools are usually placed right at the entry level of the price range, and at first glance they look like a simple bargain. A homeowner might see a circular saw, an angle grinder, or a drill accessory priced far lower than the competing options on the shelf, and assume they've just found a good deal. For someone who only needs a tool occasionally, it can feel like an easy decision. Why spend more if the cheaper one looks almost the same? But once we started digging through large numbers of owner reviews and workshop discussions, the same complaints kept repeating. The pattern that comes up most often is that Warrior tools tend to struggle when they're pushed beyond light-duty work. Owners frequently mention motors heating up quickly during longer jobs, switches wearing out earlier than expected, and cutting accessories like blades and sanding discs wearing down far faster than comparable alternatives. Some people describe the tools as working fine at first, but losing power or consistency after only a limited amount of use. What makes this frustrating for many buyers is that the problem often doesn't show up immediately. The tool may perform well during the first few projects, which gives the impression that it was a smart purchase. But over time, once the workload increases, the weaknesses begin to appear. That's why so many online discussions about Warrior tools end up sounding similar, people saying the tool worked for a while but didn't hold up once it was used regularly. Now, to be fair, some users say Warrior tools can still serve a purpose. For very occasional tasks, cutting a few boards, grinding a small piece of metal, or completing a quick household repair, the tool might do the job well enough for the price. The issue appears when buyers expect the tool to behave like something designed for long-term, repeated work. That's really the key point with Warrior. The tools are designed primarily around hitting the lowest possible price. When cost becomes the main priority in manufacturing, something else has to give. And in many cases, that trade-off shows up in durability and long-term performance. So the honest takeaway many experienced Harbor Freight shoppers mention is simple. If you're buying a tool that will only be used once or twice, Warrior might be acceptable. But if it's something you expect to reach for again and again in your garage or workshop, many people eventually wish they had stepped up to a stronger line. And that leads directly into the next brand on the blacklist, because it creates a similar situation. The price looks appealing at first, the tool seems perfectly fine on the shelf, but once people begin using it regularly, a different story often starts to appear. Blacklist number 6, Drillmaster. Drillmaster is another Harbor Freight brand that has been around for years, and if you've walked through the store more than once, you've probably seen the name on shelves filled with low-priced drills, rotary tools, sanders, and small workshop equipment. At first glance, the brand looks like a straightforward budget option. The packaging promises the basic functionality most homeowners need, and the price often comes in far below what you'd see from larger tool brands. For someone putting together their first set of tools, that price difference can make the decision feel easy. The tension begins once you start looking through long threads of owner feedback and tool forum discussions. Drillmaster shows up in many of the same conversations where people are discussing tools that didn't hold up as long as they expected. A common theme in those reviews is inconsistency. Some owners say their tool performed fine for light use, while others describe switches loosening, motors struggling under moderate load, or parts wearing down much faster than expected. One issue that comes up repeatedly involves the power output of certain Drillmaster tools. When people begin using them for tougher tasks, such as drilling through harder materials or running them for longer periods, the tools can start to feel underpowered. Users often mention that the tool slows down or heats up sooner than comparable options. This doesn't necessarily mean every Drillmaster tool fails immediately, but it does create a pattern where the performance feels unpredictable from one unit to another. Another frustration many users talk about is how quickly some components wear out. triggers, chucks, and internal parts can start to show wear sooner than buyers anticipated. For someone who only planned to assemble furniture or complete small home repairs, the tool might last long enough to do the job. But for anyone expecting to rely on the tool repeatedly over several years, the durability complaints begin to add up. That's what makes Drillmaster land on so many informal avoid lists in online tool communities. The brand exists primarily to deliver extremely low prices, and while that can be attractive for quick projects, it also means the tools are often built for occasional use rather than long-term reliability. For some buyers, that trade-off might still make sense. If a tool is only needed once or twice a year, paying the lowest possible price may feel perfectly reasonable. But when the expectation is that the tool will stay in the garage and handle many future projects, the reports from experienced users suggest that Drillmaster tools may not always hold up the way people hope. And the next brand on the blacklist is interesting because it sits in a slightly different position. It's been in Harbor Freight stores for years. It covers a huge variety of tools. And because of that, many people assume the name automatically means dependable performance. Blacklist number 5, Chicago Electric. Chicago Electric is one of the longest-standing power tool brands inside Harbor Freight. If you've shopped there for years, chances are you've seen the name on everything from grinders and circular saws to welders and heat guns. When we started reading through long threads of user feedback, Chicago Electric tools often appeared in discussions where owners were describing tools that worked well at first, but began developing problems after extended use. The most common complaints revolve around motors that heat up quickly, switches that stop responding consistently, and internal components that wear down faster than expected during repeated jobs. Another pattern that appears in reviews is inconsistency across different tools carrying the Chicago Electric name. Because the brand covers such a wide range of equipment, from small handheld tools to larger workshop machines, the quality can vary significantly depending on the product. Some owners report tools that run for years without trouble, while others describe tools losing power or failing after a relatively short period. That uneven reliability is what keeps the brand appearing in cautionary conversations among experienced Harbor Freight shoppers. A good example, often mentioned in workshop discussions, involves grinders and saws that begin to feel rough or noisy after months of use. When tools that rely on motors and gears start showing those symptoms, it usually means internal components are experiencing wear earlier than expected. For someone using the tool occasionally, that may not become a major issue. But for a homeowner or hobbyist who expects the tool to handle many future projects, the experience can be frustrating. What makes Chicago Electric especially tricky for buyers is that the tools often perform well enough during the first few uses. Early impressions can make it feel like the purchase was a smart decision. The problems tend to show up later, once the tool begins to see more regular work. That delayed decline is exactly what many reviewers describe when explaining why they eventually stopped choosing this brand. The thing to note here is that not every Chicago Electric tool fails. Plenty of people have tools from the line that still work. The issue is the number of reports pointing to durability problems once the tool is used consistently. When you're buying a tool you expect to keep for years, that kind of pattern matters. That's why many experienced Harbor Freight shoppers recommend treating Chicago Electric with caution. If the tool will only be used occasionally, it might still serve its purpose. But when reliability and long-term durability are important, buyers often prefer stepping up to stronger product lines within the store. And the next brand on the blacklist brings a completely different type of complaint. Instead of handheld power tools, this one covers larger machines. Blacklist number 4, Central Machinery. Central Machinery is the brand Harbor Freight uses for many of its larger workshop machines. If you've ever looked at drill presses, band saws, bench grinders, or small table saws in the store, there's a good chance you've seen this name. And at first glance, the appeal is obvious. These machines often cost far less than similar equipment from traditional woodworking brands. For someone trying to build a small workshop on a budget, that price difference can feel almost impossible to ignore. But once you start reading long-term owner experiences, the tension begins to appear. Unlike small handheld tools, workshop machines rely heavily on stability and precision. When a machine vibrates too much, loses alignment, or struggles to hold adjustments, the entire project can become harder than it should be. And that's exactly the pattern many users describe when talking about certain Central Machinery equipment. One of the most common complaints involves vibration and alignment. Owners frequently report that some machines require extra adjustment just to operate smoothly. Drill presses may develop wobble, and saws can need repeated tuning before they cut accurately. For someone who enjoys modifying and calibrating tools, that might not be a deal breaker, but for beginners expecting the machine to work properly out of the box, it can quickly turn into frustration. Another issue that appears in discussions is long-term durability of adjustment mechanisms. Handles, locks, and alignment guides on some machines can loosen with use. When those parts shift even slightly, precision work becomes much harder. That's why experienced hobbyists often say the machine may technically work, but it may require more effort to maintain accuracy. Now, to be fair, some owners still say central machinery tools can serve a purpose. If someone is learning woodworking or using a machine occasionally, the lower price can make the brand appealing. But when people start relying on those machines for regular projects, the differences in build quality tend to become much more noticeable. The payoff here is simple. Large machines are tools people usually expect to keep for many years. When a machine constantly needs adjustment or feels unstable during use, it takes away the confidence that makes workshop work enjoyable in the first place. Kindly take a quick second to like the video and subscribe. It helps the channel keep digging into real tool experiences that most store displays never tell you about. Now, the next brand on this list is interesting because it's one of the most recognizable names inside Harbor Freight. Blacklist number 3, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is probably the most recognized hand tool brand inside Harbor Freight. If someone owns a basic Harbor Freight socket, set, wrench set, or ratchet, there's a very high chance it carries the Pittsburgh name. The brand has been in the store for decades, and because the price is so low compared to other tool brands, many homeowners assume it's one of the safest purchases in the building. That reputation is exactly why this one deserves a closer look. According to reviews, some people say their tools worked fine for years. But in the same conversations, many mechanics explain why they stopped relying on certain Pittsburgh tools once their workload increased. A common complaint involves ratchets. In automotive forums and garage discussions, several users describe the ratchet mechanism slipping or losing engagement when higher torque is applied. A ratchet works through small internal gears called poles. When those gears are made from softer metal or wear faster than expected, the ratchet can begin skipping under pressure. In simple jobs that might not matter much, but when someone is breaking loose tight bolts, that slipping becomes a serious frustration. Another category that receives repeated criticism is some of the specialty automotive tools sold under the Pittsburgh name. Items like vacuum brake bleeders and puller kits often appear in review sections where buyers say seals failed early, pumps stopped holding pressure, or components wore out sooner than expected. When tools rely on rubber seals, springs, or precise fittings, cheaper materials can lead to faster wear. There's also a pattern that shows up in reviews discussing long-term durability. Many homeowners say Pittsburgh tools work perfectly well for light or occasional tasks. But when the same tools are used regularly, especially in automotive repair, the metal can show signs of rounding or wear faster than professional-grade tools. That doesn't mean every tool breaks immediately. What users are describing is faster wear once the tools are pushed harder. This is why Pittsburgh creates so many mixed opinions in tool communities. For someone who only needs a socket set for occasional home repairs, the brand may perform well enough for the price. But for mechanics or serious DIY users who apply higher torque regularly, the durability gap becomes much more noticeable. The honest takeaway here is not that every Pittsburgh tool should be avoided. The issue is consistency under heavy use. When the tools are used lightly, many people have good experiences. When they are pushed into regular automotive work, the weaknesses tend to appear more quickly. That's why experienced Harbor Freight shoppers often treat Pittsburgh as an entry-level option rather than a long-term investment for demanding jobs. Now, the next brand on the blacklist creates a completely different type of concern. Instead of hand tools, it focuses on cordless power tools, and the complaints people report usually revolve around something much more expensive than a worn ratchet: the battery system itself. Blacklist number 2, Bauer. For homeowners trying to build a cordless tool system without spending hundreds of dollars, Bauer can look like the smartest option in the aisle. That popularity is exactly why it deserves a closer look. Two complaints stand out repeatedly for this brand. The first one involves the battery system. Because Bauer is built around cordless tools, the batteries are the heart of the entire platform. In long review threads, many owners describe batteries losing capacity sooner than they expected. Some say the battery no longer holds a charge after extended use, while others report chargers refusing to recognize the battery pack. When that happens, the cost of replacing batteries becomes part of owning the system. And since cordless platforms rely on multiple batteries, that replacement cost can add up quickly. The second complaint, often mentioned, involves sustained performance during heavier jobs. Several reviewers say Bauer tools perform well for short tasks, but begin struggling when pushed into longer workloads. For example, users describe circular saws slowing down during thicker cuts or grinders losing power once the tool heats up. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean the tool fails immediately, but it creates a pattern where the performance becomes less consistent once the tool is used harder or longer. Another concern discussed by experienced tool users is long-term platform stability. When someone invests in a cordless tool system, they're usually committing to buying batteries and tools within that same ecosystem for years. Some buyers express hesitation about whether budget cordless platforms will remain supported long enough to justify that investment. If battery designs change or older packs disappear from shelves, replacing them can become difficult. Now, to be fair, Bauer still has plenty of positive feedback from homeowners. Many buyers say the tools are perfectly fine for weekend projects, furniture building, or occasional repairs. The tension comes when people expect the system to handle the same workload as professional cordless tools that are built for daily use. So the payoff here is really about expectations. If someone needs a cordless tool occasionally, Bauer might still serve that purpose. But if the plan is to rely on the same system for years of heavy projects, the battery complaints and performance issues mentioned in so many reviews are worth paying attention to. And that brings us to the brand that lands at the very top of this blacklist. This one surprises many Harbor Freight shoppers because the tools often look powerful on the shelf, and the price difference compared to professional brands can feel almost unbelievable. But once you look at long-term owner feedback, the pattern behind this brand becomes very hard to ignore. Blacklist number 1, Portland. Portland is Harbor Freight's budget line for outdoor power equipment. You'll find the name on electric chainsaws, pole saws, hedge trimmers, and leaf blowers. On the shelf, these tools often look like an easy win. The price is usually far lower than most outdoor brands, and for homeowners trying to clean up a yard without spending hundreds of dollars, that price difference can feel extremely tempting. But outdoor tools expose weaknesses faster than almost any other category. Unlike a drill that might run for a few minutes at a time, yard equipment often runs continuously while cutting thick wood, trimming hedges, or clearing debris. That's where many Portland tools begin to show their limitations, according to owner reviews. One of the most common complaints involves electric chainsaws in the Portland lineup. Several buyers say the saw performs well on smaller branches, but slows down noticeably when cutting thicker limbs. Some reviews mention the motor heating up during longer sessions, forcing the user to stop and wait before continuing. That type of overheating complaint appears frequently in the feedback sections for lower-cost electric saws. Another issue that appears across reviews involves durability of external components. Outdoor tools experience constant vibration, and parts like chain tension, knobs, handles, and adjustment mechanisms take repeated stress. Some Portland owners report these components loosening or wearing down after extended use, especially when the tool is used regularly during seasonal yard cleanup. There are also long-term reliability concerns mentioned in several user discussions. A pattern appears where the tool works fine during the first season, but performance begins to drop the following year. Owners sometimes describe the motor losing strength or the tool becoming less reliable after repeated yard projects. Now, to keep the picture balanced, many buyers still say Portland tools can be useful for very light-duty yard maintenance. If someone trims a few branches once in a while, the equipment may perform well enough for the price. The concern appears when buyers expect the tool to handle regular yard work across multiple seasons. Outdoor equipment is one of the most demanding categories for durability, and that's where the gap between budget tools and stronger equipment tends to become obvious. That's why Portland lands at the top of this blacklist. The tools can look like a great deal in the store, but when real yard work begins, many owners discover that the savings came with compromises in long-term reliability. And once you step back and look at the entire list, a pattern becomes clear. Most of the brands that generate the largest number of complaints are the ones designed primarily to hit the lowest possible price point rather than long-term durability. That trade-off can make sense for a one-time project, but when someone expects a tool to last for years in the garage, those small differences in build quality begin to matter a lot. If this breakdown helped you see which Harbor Freight tool brands buyers most often struggle with, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And in the comments, let us know which Harbor Freight tools have actually held up well in your workshop. Real user experiences often reveal patterns long before store shelves do.